Unfortunately, I used to see so many of my friends when I first moved to New York, just walking down the street, especially in this neighborhood. But now it doesn't happen because half of my friends died. So many more of my friends have moved out of the city, and the villages, become, a really expensive neighborhood with like celebrities and women and their nannies pushing strollers. I miss those days when the village was the center of the LGBT community. My name is Eric Sawyer. I'm 69 years old. And I'm an openly gay man living with HIV, long-term survivor, one of the founders of ACT UP, Housing Works, Health Gap, worked for the United Nations for a long time. I view myself as a public health, human rights, and AIDS activist. We're in front of the New York City LGBTQ Center. Before the onset of AIDS and before we started ACT UP, I was kind of a typical corporate clone that didn't do much with the community. After AIDS killed my boyfriend and many of my friends, and I found out I myself was living with AIDS, I was forced onto long-term disability, and my life became all about AIDS. This was, kind of the grand central of AIDS. It became my home for pretty much most of my 30s, 40s, and 50s. ACT UP met on the first floor in room 101. The mirror ball was still here. There were some ceiling fans here. There were some risers here. There would literally be hundreds of people in this room. There would be people hanging out the doors. The whole, space here would be covered with folding chairs in rows, and then, from about this pillar back, it would be standing room only. They would start with, a statement of, welcome to ACT UP. We're the coalition the AIDS Coalition to Unleash Power. We're a nonpartisan organization, united in anger, committed to end the AIDS crisis. I patched a lot of plaster walls in here, and there were artists in doing these murals. That's how I got to watch Keith Haring paint that bathroom upstairs. Because of the spread of HIV, the mayor was closing bathhouses and bars that had back rooms, and there was a lot of policing of outdoor public sex space. He's basically saying, remember when we didn't have to worry about our sex killing us or our partners, when we could have sex with kind of a reckless abandon. And he just like shh, no going back over anything, no painting over anything. It was just as it flowed out of him is as you see it on the walls. Many hospitals in the city would not admit people with AIDS. No one knowing what was causing AIDS, how to treat it, how to cure it, how to keep from getting infected. That building is part of St. Vincent's Hospital. St. Vincent's was one of the few early hospitals that would treat people with AIDS. They developed a AIDS-designated ward, the first one in the state of New York, where doctors volunteered and nurses volunteered to treat people there. And they developed standards of care that were copied, throughout the U.S. and eventually the world. St. Vincent's, went bankrupt, and the building was sold to a developer for luxury condos. There was a lot of protests about the fact that their lover was in the emergency room being treated, and homophobic security guards and staff wouldn't let the partner in to be with his sick partner because they weren't married, didn't have a recognized
familiar relationship. Literally everyone got up out of the ACT UP meeting and went over and started like making out in the emergency room and saying, gay people, and gay partners are family, and you can't deny someone access to their loved ones, because they're gay. Eventually, a Bill of Rights for patients with AIDS was negotiated with St. Vincent's to prevent maltreatment. Ironically, underneath 7th Avenue here were tunnels that connected St. Vincent's to a small building which is right where the New York City AIDS Memorial currently is. When the hospital was closed and the property was sold to be developed as condos, we came to them, a group of us who had this idea to create an AIDS Memorial Park. The negotiations with the city and with a developer who was developing the hospital took, 5 or 6 years. I'm proud to say I'm one of the founding directors. Here's my name. Much of the design is made up of triangles. That's, paying homage to the pink triangle, which was the symbol of that Nazis made gay people wear in the concentration camps when they were, like Jewish people, murdered. I really feel fortunate to have survived AIDS for 40 years. I'm one of the longest survivors of AIDS. And, it does create a sense of survivor's guilt, like, why did I survive? And that survivor's guilt, I think, has spurred me to continue to be an activist, to replicate and continue the fight that we people with AIDS began in the 80s, the fight for treatments to save our lives, and for care and support and for housing. Now the fight has gone to trying to gain healthcare equity, to gain human rights equity, to try to not only get equitable access to care, support, to housing, to food, to the latest medical interventions for everyone in this city, in this state, in the United States, but for everyone around the globe. I think it's really terrific that this memorial is right across the street from St. Vincent's Hospital. It was a place where, thousands of people with AIDS died. And I can't tell you how many of my friends I visited there who were sick with AIDS and who eventually died there. So this is this restaurant, Agave, used to be a restaurant called Woody's. And back in the 80s, when we first started ACT UP, which started in 87, many of us would come down here after ACT UP meetings and have dinner. Michael Petrelis is riding his bicycle with a front basket down the street in front of Larry Kramer and Vito Russo and I, and Vito Russo starts singing da 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 da. It's the Wicked Witch. So that was one of my favorite memories of the trip to Woody's. The village was so gay then still. Now it's like, full of celebrities and, really expensive boutiques and cupcake places that sell cupcakes that cost more than dinner should. This was one of the first bars I went to in New York, Julius, that were approaching. It remains one of my favorite bars today. Hey you, how are you? Could I get a side of mayo? The French fries are epic. They're the best fries in New York City. I come here often just for bourbon and fries. You can look at this picture. It says on it April 1966. It's unchanged since then. Homosexuals to get served here had to try to pass and not show affection to each other or not dress flamboyantly. Drag queens could not come in here. And it was the site of the sip-in. This depicts some openly gay men coming and announcing to the bartender that they're gay and they demand to be served drinks because there was a law at the time that it was illegal to serve alcohol to homosexuals. This guy was a New York Times reporter, and there was a New York Times photographer shooting that picture from over in that corner across the bar, recording the whole thing. It became a huge story in the New York Times and began a lawsuit challenging the law against serving alcohol to homosexuals, which was eventually overturned. I'm not a big listener of music, but there are some songs that meant a lot to me that have a significance around HIV. Like one of them is the Kate Bush song "Running Up That Hill," which became popular this year because of a TV show. But that was important to me when my boyfriend died of AIDS in 1986, because there's a lyric in it that says, if I only could, I'd make a deal with God to get him to swap our places. You'd be running up that hill, no problems. So it's all about, I'd trade my life if you could have yours. And I played that on like pretty much a continual loop after my boyfriend died. It's sad that our success in developing an AIDS response and getting treatments to extend our lives has made HIV something that almost no one talks about anymore, that everyone thinks the AIDS crisis is over because we were successful in forcing the government and drug companies to develop treatments that extend our lives.
To you today is about the struggle between...
At least the memorial is here so that those who remember that time can come here and have a contemplative space where we can remember all of our loved ones who we lost to AIDS, and can remember, the war that we had to wage to get the world to care and to get those drugs developed. Sadly, it doesn't bring any of those people back, and sadly, so many people will never know the wonderful people that we lost to AIDS, and that includes my friend Larry Kurt, who is the original Tony and West Side Story, whose ashes I dumped on the White House lawn. I mean, I don't think a lot of young people understand how far the LGBT community has come, about how much LGBT people were hated, about how badly we were treated, about how horrible the circumstances of the AIDS crisis were, and that I think they do have an obligation, younger LGBT people, to learn their history, to know what we went through, and to appreciate the work that it took for LGBT people to be accepted to the degree they are today.